What if the answers you seek aren't out there, but hidden deep inside in the parts of yourself you've been avoiding? Carl Jung, one of the most influential minds in psychology, believed true meaning comes from facing our hidden selves. His discoveries could change how you see yourself forever. Today, we uncover Jung's most powerful ideas, and to break them down, we have two powerful minds at the table.
I'm Maya, and I have one job today: to ask the tough questions you're probably already thinking.
And I'm Alex. I've studied Jung's work for years, and once you understand what he discovered, you might start questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself.
Get ready, because this conversation might just change the way you see yourself. Let's begin. We all like to think we're in control of our lives. But if that's true, why do so many people feel lost, disconnected, and unsure of who they really are? Could it be that something deeper is shaping our decisions? Something we're not even aware of?
I hear people say all the time, "I don't know who I am anymore." But how do you even lose yourself? That doesn't make sense. Isn't life just about making choices? You pick a career, build relationships, and move forward. If you feel lost, maybe you're just overthinking things, right? I mean, if you're unhappy, just change something. Get a new job, meet new people, try a new hobby. Feeling lost seems more like an excuse than a real problem. Everyone has doubts now and then. That's just life. Maybe people today are just too obsessed with finding themselves when they should focus on doing something productive instead.
It seems simple on the surface, but Jung believed that feeling lost isn't about a lack of direction. It's about a disconnect between our conscious identity and our unconscious self. People feel lost because they mistake their external roles, their job, relationships, or social status, for their true identity. But deep down, they sense something is missing. The unconscious tries to send signals through dreams, emotions, or moments of crisis, letting them know they are living in a way that doesn't align with who they really are. Have you ever heard of someone who, despite having everything, still feels empty inside? That's not just dissatisfaction. It's a deeper issue, an inner conflict between who they think they should be and who they really are.
So you're saying we're not actually in control of our own lives? That sounds unsettling. If we're driven by something we can't see, how do we even know if we're making real choices? What if we're just passengers in our own minds, going through life on autopilot? And if that's true, then what's the point of self-improvement? If our unconscious is shaping everything, how do we know if we're changing in the right way? Maybe we're just swapping one illusion for another. And if the unconscious is so powerful, wouldn't that mean we are all just reacting to things without ever making a real decision of our own?
That's the unsettling part. Most people are on autopilot, repeating patterns without realizing why. The unconscious is like a hidden script, shaping our reactions, desires, and fears. Think of it like an iceberg. The conscious mind is just the tip above water, but beneath the surface lies a vast, unseen world of emotions, memories, and instincts. When someone feels lost, it's usually because their conscious choices no longer align with their deeper self. They may have followed a path that society, their family, or even their past trauma told them was right, but ignored what they truly wanted. Eventually, that disconnect creates an internal crisis. If you've ever felt like you were playing a role in your own life, it's because your unconscious is trying to tell you that you're not being true to yourself. The more we ignore these signals, the stronger they become.
Okay, but what if someone doesn't want to dig into all that? Maybe ignorance really is bliss. I mean, if my unconscious is running the show anyway, why poke the bear? Maybe it's safer to just keep moving forward and not look too deeply. If we start questioning everything, our motives, our decisions, even our sense of identity, don't we risk unraveling everything that holds us together? What if looking into our unconscious just makes us feel even more lost? It's already hard enough dealing with life as it is. Wouldn't digging into the past and exploring hidden parts of ourselves just make things worse?
That's exactly the problem. The more you ignore what's inside you, the more control it has over you. Jung discovered that when we suppress our unconscious fears, desires, and memories, they don't disappear. They manifest in our behavior, our habits, and even our relationships. Think about self-sabotage. Why do people undermine their own success, stay in toxic relationships, or repeat the same mistakes? It's not a coincidence. It's the unconscious acting out the conflicts we refuse to acknowledge. You can't outrun yourself forever. At some point, your unconscious will demand to be heard, whether you like it or not. The real danger isn't looking too deeply. It's avoiding it for so long that it erupts in ways you can't control.
So if we don't confront what's hidden inside us, it ends up controlling us? That's unsettling. But what exactly are we avoiding? What's buried so deep in us that we're afraid to face it? I get that we have hidden fears, but if that's all it is, why does it hold so much power? And why do people sabotage themselves over things that seem so irrational? If my unconscious is really influencing everything, then what else is hiding in there?
In the next chapter, we explore Jung's most controversial idea, the shadow self. What happens when we finally look into the darkness within us? And more importantly, can we handle what we find? We like to believe we know who we are, but what if part of us remains hidden, not just from others, but from ourselves? Jung called this the shadow, the part of our psyche we suppress, deny, or refuse to confront. The question is, if we don't face it, does it control us?
All right, so let me get this straight. You're telling me there's a hidden part of me that I don't even know about, and worse, that it somehow controls my behavior. That sounds ridiculous. I mean, sure, everyone has moments where they do something out of character. Maybe you lose your temper or say something you regret, but that doesn't mean there's some secret force inside me pulling the strings. Isn't this just another way of making excuses for bad behavior? Like, oh, that wasn't me, it was my shadow. That sounds like a convenient way to avoid responsibility.
It's not about avoiding responsibility. It's about understanding why we act the way we do. The shadow isn't some external entity controlling you. It's a part of you, but a part you refuse to accept. Jung described the shadow as everything we deny or repress about ourselves. It's made up of qualities we've been taught are bad: anger, jealousy, selfishness, insecurity. But here's the problem. Just because we deny these traits doesn't mean they disappear. In fact, the more we suppress them, the more they control us. They show up in our unconscious reactions, in the way we judge others, and even in self-sabotage. Have you ever met someone who hates liars, yet constantly lies to themselves? That's their shadow at work.
So you're saying that by ignoring my flaws, they actually gain more control over me? That doesn't make sense. If I refuse to acknowledge something, shouldn't that mean it has less influence over my life, not more? And even if there is some truth to this, why should I go digging for things that make me uncomfortable? Isn't it better to focus on the positive and just try to be a good person? If I start obsessing over my shadow, won't that just make me feel worse about myself?
That's exactly what Jung warned against. The more you suppress your shadow, the stronger its grip becomes. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how the things we dislike most in others are often things we subconsciously struggle with ourselves? For example, someone who constantly criticizes arrogance may secretly crave recognition but is too afraid to admit it. A person who preaches about kindness might be suppressing their own unresolved anger. That's projection, one of the ways the shadow sneaks into our lives. When we don't acknowledge our own flaws, we start seeing them everywhere except in ourselves. That's why embracing the shadow isn't about negativity. It's about self-honesty. When you accept your darkness instead of running from it, you gain the ability to control it.
All right, but let's be real. Most people don't want to confront their darkest thoughts. It's uncomfortable. If the shadow is full of all the things I've rejected about myself, doesn't that mean looking at it will just make me feel worse? If I really start examining my hidden flaws and past mistakes, won't that lead to guilt, shame, or regret? Maybe ignorance isn't just bliss. Maybe it's survival. I get why it's important to acknowledge these things, but what if it's just too much?
That's the paradox. The real danger isn't facing your shadow, it's ignoring it. Suppressed emotions don't go away. They find new ways to surface. If you ignore your anger, it might come out as passive aggressiveness. If you deny your insecurity, you might compensate by becoming arrogant. The shadow always finds a way to express itself. Jung believed that true self-mastery isn't about pretending to be good. It's about integrating every part of yourself. The more you own your flaws, the less they control you. It's like making peace with an old enemy. Once you understand it, you can stop fighting against yourself. And when that happens, you become something truly rare, a whole person.
So the more I avoid my shadow, the stronger it gets. And if I don't deal with it, it'll show up in ways I don't even realize. That's unsettling. But what if my shadow isn't just made up of fears and weaknesses? What if it holds something more, something I actually need? Could the parts of myself I've rejected be the key to something greater?
In the next chapter, we explore an even deeper mystery. What if the shadow isn't just a burden, but a hidden source of power? And if that's true, what happens when we finally embrace it? If the shadow is made up of everything we suppress, our flaws, fears, and desires, then why would anyone want to face it? Wouldn't that just make us feel worse? But what if the shadow isn't just darkness? What if it holds something we actually need?
All right, I get it. The shadow is the part of myself I ignore. And if I don't deal with it, it controls me. But here's what I don't get. What's the point of looking at my shadow? If it's full of fears, insecurities, and bad traits, then why dig into it? It's not like suddenly realizing I'm jealous or selfish is going to make my life better. If anything, it seems like a recipe for guilt and regret. Why not just focus on improving myself instead of digging into all the things I'd rather forget?
That's the mistake most people make. They think the shadow is only negative. But Jung believed the shadow also contains our hidden strengths. Qualities we've buried, not because they're bad, but because we were taught to reject them. Think of the kid who was scolded for being too loud. So he grew up afraid to speak his mind, or the person who was told their dreams were unrealistic, so they stopped trying. Over time, these parts of us, our confidence, our passion, our ambition, get locked away in the shadow. So when we ignore it, we're not just suppressing our fears, we're suppressing our full potential.
Wait, so you're saying my shadow isn't just all the bad stuff, but also parts of me that could be useful? That's hard to believe. I get how people suppress negative traits, but why would someone bury their strengths? If something is valuable, wouldn't we naturally want to use it? I mean, who in their right mind would choose to ignore their own talents?
That's the thing. We don't choose to ignore them. Society does it for us. From the moment we're born, we're conditioned to fit in. We learn which traits are acceptable and which ones aren't. If a child is naturally assertive but is constantly told to be nice and not be so bossy, they may start associating leadership with being bad. If someone is highly creative but grows up in an environment that values practicality, they may suppress their artistic side. Jung believed that facing the shadow isn't just about confronting our darkness, it's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves we abandoned. The moment we stop running from the shadow, we start unlocking parts of ourselves we didn't even know we had.
So, let me get this straight. My shadow isn't just full of the things I don't like about myself, but also the parts of me that I was forced to reject. And if I don't face it, I risk losing those things forever? That's actually kind of terrifying. What if I've already buried too much? What if I've lost touch with who I really am? And even if I do look into my shadow, how do I even begin to bring those parts of myself back?
That's the real challenge, integration. Recognizing your shadow isn't enough. Jung believed we must integrate it into our conscious self. That means embracing what we've ignored, confronting what we fear, and owning every part of who we are. Imagine how powerful you'd be if you stopped running from yourself. If instead of suppressing your confidence, you reclaimed it. If instead of fearing your emotions, you understood them. That's what individuation is, the process of becoming whole. And it only happens when we stop pretending to be someone we're not and start accepting everything we are.
So facing my shadow isn't just about dealing with my flaws, it's about reclaiming the best parts of myself too. That changes everything. But if my true self has been buried under years of conditioning, how do I even begin to find it again? What if I don't even know who I really am anymore?
In the next chapter, we dive into individuation, Jung's ultimate path to self-discovery. What does it really mean to become whole? And if we strip away the masks we've been wearing, what's left underneath? We all wear masks, whether it's at work, in relationships, or even with ourselves. We present a version of who we think we should be. But if we spend our lives playing a role, do we ever truly know who we are?
Okay, so we've talked about the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. But now you're telling me there's another layer? Something called the persona? Look, I get that people act differently in different situations. You don't talk to your boss the way you talk to your best friend. But that's just common sense, right? Adapting to situations doesn't mean you're fake. It just means you know how to function in the real world. Why would Jung make this into a psychological problem?
Because it becomes a problem when the mask takes over. Jung described the persona as the social mask we wear to fit in. It's the version of ourselves that conforms to expectations, who we think we need to be in order to be accepted. And you're right, adapting to situations is normal. But what happens when you start believing the mask is who you really are? What if, over time, you bury your true self so deeply that you forget who you were in the first place? That's when the persona stops being useful and starts becoming a trap. You're not just adapting, you're performing. And when the performance never stops, you start to feel empty inside, like something is missing. That's the cost of losing touch with your real self. A shadowy abyss stretches out, and a lone figure stands on the brink, contemplating the void within.
I mean, sure, people act differently in public than they do when they're alone. But isn't that just normal human behavior? If we all went around being our true selves all the time, wouldn't society just fall apart? We'd be blurting out our deepest thoughts to strangers, breaking social norms, and probably making everyone uncomfortable. Isn't some level of pretending just necessary for life?
Of course, some level of persona is necessary. The problem is when the persona isn't just something you use, it's something you become. Think about people who dedicate their lives to being successful, but never stop to ask if success even makes them happy, or the person who's always the funny one in their friend group, even when they're miserable inside. Over time, the persona becomes a prison, trapping you in an identity that isn't really yours. Jung believed this was why so many people feel lost. If you spend your life wearing a mask, eventually you forget what's underneath. That's why individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires us to take off the mask and figure out who we really are, beyond society's expectations.
That actually hits hard, because now that I think about it, how do I know which parts of me are real and which are just the persona? I mean, if I've been conditioned to act a certain way my whole life, then maybe I've just been playing a role without even realizing it. But how do I tell the difference? How do I know if the me I've built is the real me, or just the version of me that I thought the world wanted?
That's the question Jung wanted us all to ask. If you want to know who you really are, you have to start by asking, what parts of me feel real? And what parts feel like an act? Start noticing when you censor yourself, when you suppress emotions because they don't fit the image you've created. The moments where you do things not because you want to, but because you feel like you should. The more you become aware of the persona, the more you start to reclaim your true self. And that's the first step toward individuation, toward breaking free from the expectations that have kept you from truly knowing yourself.
So my persona is the mask I wear to fit into the world. And if I'm not careful, I might mistake it for my real self. That's unsettling. But what happens when I finally take off the mask? If I strip away all the expectations and roles I've been playing, what's left? Am I even ready to face that?
In the next chapter, we dive into individuation, Jung's ultimate path to self-discovery. If the persona is a mask and the shadow is our hidden self, then what happens when we bring it all together? And more importantly, what if we've spent so long pretending that we've forgotten who we really are? If the persona is the mask we wear and the shadow is everything we've suppressed, then what happens when we bring it all together? Jung believed that true self-discovery isn't about perfection, it's about wholeness. But how do we become whole when we've spent our entire lives hiding from parts of ourselves?
All right, so I get it now. The persona is the mask I wear for the world, and the shadow is the stuff I've buried inside me. And apparently, I need to integrate these things if I ever want to really know myself. But how exactly does that work? Like, what am I supposed to do? Just sit in a dark room and reflect on my childhood trauma? What if I don't even remember what I've suppressed? Or worse, what if I do all this self-discovery stuff and realize I don't like what I find?
That's why Jung called it the process of individuation. It's not something you figure out overnight. Individuation is the journey of integrating every part of yourself, both the light and the dark, the parts you love and the parts you wish weren't there. Think of it like assembling a puzzle. If you're missing pieces, the picture is incomplete, but most people don't even realize they're walking around with half their pieces missing. Instead of facing the uncomfortable truths about themselves, they distract themselves with work, relationships, or external success. But deep down, something always feels off. That's why individuation isn't about fixing yourself. It's about accepting yourself completely, so you stop feeling like a fragmented version of who you could be.
Okay, but let's be honest. Nobody wants to confront the uncomfortable parts of themselves. I mean, isn't it just easier to focus on the good stuff? To build confidence, work on strengths, and just move forward instead of digging into all this heavy psychological stuff? And even if I do start this whole individuation thing, how do I know I'm doing it right? How do I even know when I've integrated my shadow or dropped my persona? There's no checklist for this, right? So how do I know I'm not just going in circles?
You know you're on the path of individuation when you stop looking for external validation to define who you are. Most people build their identity around what they think will make them valuable to others. They play the role of the successful one, the nice one, or the strong one, hoping that if they just do it well enough, they'll finally feel complete. But individuation isn't about becoming more of something. It's about becoming yourself. That means embracing every part of you, even the ones that don't fit the expectations you've been given. It means making peace with your fears instead of avoiding them. It means trusting your own instincts instead of constantly searching for approval. And most of all, it means living a life that feels authentic to you, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else.
That actually makes a lot of sense. When I think about it, most of the big decisions in my life have been influenced by what I thought I was supposed to do, not necessarily what I truly wanted. But now that raises a whole new question. If I've spent years playing a role, making choices based on my persona instead of my real self, then what happens if I strip all that away? If I stop being who I thought I should be, how do I even know what's left? What if I go through this whole process and realize I don't even know who I really am?
That's the real fear, isn't it? The fear that without the persona, without the roles you've played, you'll be left with nothing. But Jung would say the opposite. That's exactly where your true self begins. Individuation isn't about discovering some pre-made version of yourself that was hiding all along. It's about creating yourself, consciously and intentionally. You decide who you become. And when you do that, not based on fear, not based on what others expect, but based on what actually feels real to you, that's when you stop feeling lost. Because for the first time, you're not just reacting to life, you're actually living it.
So individuation isn't about finding some true self that was hidden all along. It's about becoming whole. It's about taking all the pieces, my persona, my shadow, my fears, my strengths, and owning them completely. That actually sounds freeing. But there's still one thing I don't get. If this whole process is about becoming whole, then what about the parts of me that don't feel personal? The things I didn't just pick up from life experience, but the deeper things, dreams, symbols, patterns that seem bigger than me? Could it be that my unconscious isn't just personal, but connected to something larger?
In the next chapter, we explore Jung's most fascinating idea, the collective unconscious. If individuation is about integrating your personal unconscious, then what happens when you realize your unconscious is part of something much greater? And more importantly, how do you recognize the signs that it's already influencing you? We like to think we are unique individuals, shaped by our personal experiences. But what if our minds are connected to something much larger, something ancient? Jung believed that beneath our personal unconscious lies something deeper, the collective unconscious, a realm of universal symbols and patterns that have shaped humanity for centuries. But if that's true, then how much of us is truly ours?
All right, hold on. Up until now, we've been talking about the unconscious as something personal. The shadow, the persona, all the hidden stuff we bury inside ourselves. But now you're saying there's a whole other level? Something called the collective unconscious? That sounds pretty mystical. Are we talking about some kind of hive mind? Because I thought psychology was about understanding the individual, not suggesting we're all plugged into some shared mental network like a psychological internet.
It's not a hive mind. Think of it more like a deep blueprint, a set of psychological structures we all share regardless of where or when we were born. Jung discovered this by studying myths, religions, and ancient symbols from different cultures. He noticed that across time and geography, people kept telling the same kinds of stories. The hero's journey, the wise old mentor, the shadowy villain. He found that people all over the world had eerily similar dream symbols, even when they had never been exposed to the same cultures. This led him to believe that beyond our personal experiences, we inherit a collective unconscious, a reservoir of universal patterns and symbols, which he called archetypes. These archetypes shape our dreams, our myths, and even our personal growth without us realizing it.
Okay, but that still doesn't explain how these symbols get into our minds. I mean, sure, humans tell similar stories. We all have fears, we all struggle, we all seek meaning. But that's just human nature, right? If people dream of the same things, isn't it because we all experience the same emotions? Maybe it's just coincidence, or maybe it's cultural. People pick up symbols from the world around them, and then their minds mix it into their dreams. Why does there have to be some collective source?
That's exactly the question Jung asked. Are archetypes just coincidences, or are they wired into us? His research suggested it wasn't just learned behavior. Take, for example, a child who has never heard of monsters but is still afraid of the dark, or ancient civilizations separated by oceans that all created similar gods of creation and destruction. These patterns show up everywhere, not because people copied each other, but because they emerged from the same deep psychological structures. Think about the hero's journey, a universal story where the hero is called to adventure, faces trials, descends into darkness, and emerges transformed. This structure isn't just in myths. It's in modern movies, books, and even personal struggles. Why? Because it mirrors how we experience life itself. It reflects something deep within us that isn't learned, it's remembered.
So you're saying these archetypes don't just exist in myths and stories. They also shape our actual lives? Like even without realizing it, we're all living out these patterns? That's kind of disturbing. I mean, if these unconscious forces are guiding us, does that mean we're just playing out some pre-written script? Do I really have free will, or am I just following some ancient psychological blueprint that's been passed down for centuries?
That's the paradox, yes. The patterns are ancient, but how you live them is entirely up to you. The hero's journey isn't a script, it's a map. It shows that growth always follows the same structure. We face a challenge, we struggle, we change. But what you do with that journey is your choice. You can refuse the call, stay stuck in the known, and avoid transformation. Or you can step into the unknown, face your fears, and become something more. Jung believed that understanding the collective unconscious isn't about surrendering to it. It's about recognizing it so you can take control. Once you know the patterns, you stop being a passive character in the story and start writing your own myth.
So these ancient patterns are shaping me whether I realize it or not. But if I become aware of them, I can actually use them to shape my own life? That's a wild idea. It makes me wonder, if we all share this deeper unconscious, then are we really as separate as we think? If my mind is connected to something bigger, then what does that say about who I really am?
Under the towering umbrella of the ancient forest, Eleanor wandered aimlessly. The dappled sunlight danced across her path as she moved, lost in contemplation. Her silk dress whispered softly against the leaves. Around her, the forest seemed to pulse with quiet life, a heavy silence punctuated by distant bird calls. She paused, her fingers brushing the rough bark of a tree as she considered her path. Her eyes traced the faint outline of a deer grazing nearby. Ahead, the path forked in two, shrouded in mystery. Eleanor stood at the crossroads, the air thick with anticipation. Her heart pounded in her chest, echoing the uncertainty she felt. With a deep breath, she chose the right path, drawn by an inexplicable sense of destiny. The forest seemed to narrow and darken, embracing her journey with shadows. Her footsteps were the only sound as she descended deeper into the unknown. If you fully accepted your shadow and let go of your persona, who would you become? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more Jungian insights, and click the next video to continue your journey.